Hello. How's everyone doing? All right. Let me know if this is actually too loud. I can't tell from here, but it's good. Okay. Cool. So I guess I don't need to super introduce myself, but I'm Kevin Galligan. I am partnered at a company called TouchLab. I have sort of a couple decades of professional coding and started doing the Android before there was like a phone. So that was like 2008-ish. And company TouchLab, the brief tell you about TouchLab. It's a mostly mobile shop. Started around 2010. We were Android only until about 2016, and we kind of make apps and sort of weird hardware things. So if you've seen the mirror workout thing, we kind of been working on that. In New York, they have the replacement for payphones, which is like a tower with a touch screen on it. We kind of worked on that stuff. So in the recent years, we've become super focused on Kotlin Multiplatform and see it as sort of the platform for the next decade plus. A lot of that is driven sort of by me and my weird tech obsessions. I kind of find things really early that I think are super cool and work on them when everyone thinks I'm nuts. Unfortunately, recently we've had a really good collaboration with some folks who are also the same brand of nuts as far as multi-platform is concerned. So with them, our focus is really like trying to make it a better iOS experience. So we released like an Xcode plugin for Kotlin so you can debug and help with the interface and essentially just kind of work on stuff like that. So I do mostly open source and research and speaking to various crowds and whatnot. And I'm pretty lucky about that. I don't like running the consulting company so much anymore. So this is where I started the Keynote specific part. Like, hi Boston, how's everyone doing? Ready for a Saturday of Kotlin stuff?
Yeah.
Cool. Yeah. All right. So my talk is very technical. And I know some of the organizers, and they asked, like, hey, do you want to give a keynote? Because you seem to be heavily involved in Kotlin multi-platform stuff. And the answer is yes. Like, you just have to say yes to someone that has that in your career, I guess. So I'm going to tack on some keynote kind of stuff to tie in the talk to like something a little more broad. And then when we get to the technical part, it may be interesting, it may not, but we'll see how that goes. So I run lots of conferences. The other thing that we do is DroidCon NYC. We've done that since 2014. I'm involved in DroidCon SF and various other DroidCons and smaller conferences. We run the big New York meetup for Android. So I've talked to a lot of people about giving keynotes. I sort of advise like, hey, this is probably what you should focus on, maybe not so much that. So for a community conference, I would say the best keynote is like, let's talk a bit about community, have like an inspiring call to action, set a positive tone for the event, maybe not so much politics, don't really want to get into it. There's a lot of things I've seen that you don't want to do. So I'm very excited for Kotlin World Boston because I feel like I'm home. I just came from Sweden, so I decided to go speak at this conference called ORDEV, like directly before coming back here. And they were very welcoming, but it was a general tech conference, and they didn't know much about what I was going to talk about or anything about what I was going to do. It was kind of good to see what the rest of the tech scene is focused on, but it's also nice to get back with a group of people that know what Kotlin is, even, or possibly do mobile. Who has never used Kotlin? Okay, not to call you out, sorry, I should have known that. Who's like a mobile developer, or has some mobile developer experience? Okay, that was not the reaction I got in Sweden. So some stuff in Sweden was confusing. I got briefly stuck in a supermarket. Yeah, so they have like, at the entrance, they have all these scanners. And I was like, do I take a scanner? And I also had just not slept for 30 hours, so I kind of sat there and watched people take the scanners and was trying to figure out what they were doing. And then the signage was not very helpful. So I had to ask someone to let me out of the supermarket because they have gates. And like, you can't just like walk out. It was really interesting. First of all, make sure you have Google Translate on your phone before you get to a foreign country. And second of all, just FYI, pretty much everyone in Sweden speaks English, and they also don't need a scanner. You can just buy stuff because they have a checkout counter. I found out afterwards. Anyway, so Kotlin Multiplatform is like, at least to me, anyway, at this point, right? I was here to talk about KDP, and it's essentially, again, 100% what I'm doing with my time. We're pivoting the business around it. I wake up every morning and check the Kotlin native commits. Like this morning I did that too, just to see if there's anything interesting. They have a major string handling change this morning, which might affect performance, so that was exciting. I started doing Kotlin in Professionally in 2014, we started the Kotlin NYC meetup, and nobody came because it was like nobody had heard of it. But it was really fun to be involved in something that I thought was obviously destined for success, right? It's like I get my own special little secret. And the fact that Kotlin was made by JetBrains, who also makes the tools, and it was a really interesting language, it meant to me that it was going to work out eventually, right? So we put our first apps in Kotlin in the middle of 2014, not for clients, because that would be irresponsible, but for our conference app and things like that. And that was like super, super early. And then back in 2017, JetBrains released the first preview of iOS apps in Kotlin Native, and absolutely nobody cared then either. I was less sold on it at that point. It was like super rough. We almost had the first Kotlin Native app in the App Store. Kotlin Conf and JetBrains beat us by a couple weeks. Neither app was pretty nice. They were all pretty terrible, but still. And then Kotlin Multiplatform in 2018. It was announced, Multiplatform was announced in 2017, which I thought was like crazy premature because it basically was not functional then. But about the middle of 2018, it started being more useful. There were some crazy dreamers who also got involved. Russell Wolf, who I think built one of the first libraries. I think there were probably like 5 to 10 of us in a Slack group in the entire world that were focused on this at all. But it's interesting, the community aspect, like I'm here because we both have that shared weird vision like a year ago and kind of got to know each other over the Slack, right? And then he's come and spoken at DroidCon about the exact same topic that I'm talking to you today, so it'll be interesting. KP is sort of our little secret, right? But more and more people are starting to hear about it. And it's very exciting to watch it become real. That's why they invited me to BoardDev, even though they didn't understand what it was. And I can tell you for sure, when I asked those questions about how many people know Kotlin or are mobile developers, like less than a third of the crowd raised their hands. And it was like, oh boy, the rest of this talk is not going to be very useful for you, but we'll see how it goes. And I don't think I'll be going back to BoardDev soon, but we'll see. So sometimes this feels kind of slow, but again, I'm watching it very closely, right? Every morning I wake up, look at the progress on the commits. It's like the watch pot that never boils. But if you're not watching it every day, it's actually moving very, very fast. And it has progressed an enormous amount over the last year, right? And I still get really excited about new releases and libraries, unless they're competing libraries to mine, which I'm not less excited about. But that's what happens in open source. And like the features of the language and the ecosystem is kind of like my own little Christmas every few weeks. So it's cool. But Kotlin, right, like that's Android Swift, right? So that was like the conversation I had at BoardDev, like repeatedly, over and over again, right? And granted, it was a general tech conference, but still, it was like that was what everyone thinks, right? And I have a lot of notes here. I'm scanning them and ignoring those things because we already covered it. Yeah, you know, I had that. Everyone at the conference, if they ever heard of Kotlin, it was like, oh right, that's Google's thing with eating Android, which is like whatever. We mostly think that too, even though we kind of mentally know that better. When I say we, I mean the mobile development community around Android. So yes, everyone's kind of heard of multi-platform, but it's still, everyone thinks of it just in terms of Android. And the multi-platform part, like either they haven't done much with it, or like everyone's like, well, it's not ready, right? Like it's still experimental, or it's still in beta, yada yada. And I'm here to say, like, it is for real. It is absolutely happening quietly, sort of ish. A lot of people are starting to put this into production, or at least they're seriously evaluating it, and that is going to be significantly increasing over the next year. Like my company is trying to get leads, and 6 months ago, if we got any lead at all about multi-platform, it was like everybody stop what you're doing. The whole company gets together to have a meeting to discuss strategy. And then I got back from BoardDev and they're like, yeah, we have 3 meetings this week. You probably aren't going to be in any of them. Oh, okay, well that's cool. So it's definitely picking up quite a bit. How much, as mentioned, Compass is putting in production, and they're sponsoring my talk, which I've never even heard of, and I'm super, flattered. But it is, they're shipping, and a lot of people are shipping, and there's a lot of excitement around it. So I'm here to say it's absolutely real. It is happening, and it's growing significantly. It is not just another language. It is not just, like there's Rust and Go Mobile and C++ and Kotlin. Like, that's not how it works. It is a different way of sharing logic, reportable logic. And it integrates very well with the native ecosystem, the JVM.js and native, especially on iOS and macOS. Like I quite literally added generics output to the interface for iOS. So I know that quite well. And the way that it interacts with the native language is fundamentally different, and I think it's going to be key to the success of multi-platform. So we are at the beginning of a journey, right? And we get to change how tech gets made. Just like Kotlin itself in 2014, we're sort of at the beginning of this really great change that's going to happen over the next 10 plus years. It's a moment in time where you can get started with something before it's big, right? You can contribute to early libraries. You can have, outside influence on the early ecosystem, the early thinking, and sort of the networking and all that stuff around the ecosystem, right? It's like a little secret that now everybody in this room knows, and hopefully you check it out. And I think it's going to be big. Early community involvement for me has been career transforming, right? So we were sort of early in the New York startup scene, over a decade ago, and the first co-working space in New York, and you get to meet everybody and all the other crazy people that are way ahead of the curve. You get to meet them too. They tend to be people doing really interesting stuff. Early Android meant starting a business, even though we got to make a ton of mistakes because nobody else was out there doing it. Got deep network connections, running conferences. I met my wife running tech conferences because of the Android ecosystem. So obviously that's transformed your life a bit. So any community involvement is good, but getting in really early in something that's going to be big can have an outsized influence on your career. So it's cool. Check it out. However, success requires participation, right? I think KMP is going to be big. There's definitely no guarantees. We need community participation. So if everybody says, okay, I'll wait until this is ready, it's probably not going to be ready. So you got to get in there and try out some weird stuff, right? Go out and tell people that no, it's not just Swift for Android. Publish a blog post, try it out, complain about the memory model, whatever you got to do. Just talk about it. Kotlin is definitely more than Android. And I also tell people to push tech internally. I'll talk about it later, but we're publishing this kit to help people do evaluations in their org. So do a hack week, show people how it works. Convince management to check it out. React Native is not going to solve all your problems, maybe it will, I don't know. That kind of thing, right? And if your manager just hates it, we're also hiring for KMP engineers. Maybe that's something you want to check out. Who knows? But the ecosystem needs libraries. We're never going to get very far without the libraries that need to be built, and that is what I'm here to talk about. So we're going to transition into the more technical part of the talk at this point. So I also have better animations in this part of the talk, which the marketing people help me out with. So libraries are crucial for any ecosystem. There was this blog post that came out recently from Dropbox, and I would say it's a great blog post about why C++ is not a good choice for sharing mobile logic. But the author kind of tries to extend that to any form of sharing logic, which I found to be disingenuous at best. No offense, blog post author. You probably shouldn't quote yourself in your own talk, but I did. So shared UI is a history of pain and failure, and shared logic is a history of computers, which is kind of how I would sum up why I'm into the KMP thing versus whatever else. Not that C++ is shared UI, but the idea that shared logic is just inherently more costly than writing things multiple times is kind of bananas. If you can get rid of the impediments to sharing your logic, doesn't it make sense that it would make sense to do so? So in that blog post, the one thing that I absolutely agree with is this. It's easy to see that C++ is a very small community for native mobile, and you're going to have to write a bunch of stuff by yourself, which is enormously costly and it wastes a lot of time, right? Of course. So KMP is absolutely no exception, and in fact, it is more so of a problem. It is very lean, okay? So it might be running in JavaScript or on a server. I might put it on my custom hardware keyboard, some crazy IoT thing. So you don't know about, will you have threads or not have threads? Do you have local storage? Do you not have files? It's a lot of things you don't know. So you don't get this out of the box, right? You don't get concurrency, locale, date time, yada, 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 right? Most of what you would expect in the JRE, I'm assuming most of you are JVM related or adjacent developers. Yeah, most of the JRE you don't really get, right? If you want the JRE running on iOS, then your J2 OBJC is your world. And I know people are like, well, that sucks. So I'm here to tell you, it actually doesn't. It's not that bad, but nobody liked it because it's unsexy. So anyway, in Kotlin Multiplatform, you don't get that. So there's kind of a big hill to climb, which is a little daunting at first. If you go to build something now, you will find things that aren't there, and that can be frustrating. However, the Kotlin ecosystem is very strong. there's a lot of people out there trying to do stuff and very interested in building these things. And established networks for open source exist. Hence the touch lab and square thing that I mentioned earlier. And again, if you're going to get involved early, you can have an outside influence. If you've ever heard of a thing called ORM Lite, I'm the reason that it exists on Android, so either you're welcome or I'm sorry, depending on how you look at it. But I guarantee you, if you have an Android phone, you have some code that I did on your phone, that I wrote like a decade ago. So, do you have any idea how hard it would be to like add a library to Android now in 2019 and get any attention for it? Exceptionally hard, because there's a ton of stuff out there, right? So, I talk about that later, but I brought it up earlier. Never mind. So, pretend I didn't say that. So, we have a very engaged community, right? Like you're here on a Saturday, no less. Yeah, so it's pretty exciting, and I think that's going to work out. So, why consider KNP versus any other open source thing if you just decide you want to be in open source? There's lots of interest. This was before my DroidCon UK talk a year ago. I would expect more people there at this point. Somebody pointed out that if they're so interested, why are they looking at their phones? And that's because I took the picture before I started speaking. Obviously, they were fully rapt attention once I started going, of course. Yeah, so growth and deployment in 2020. Again, like a year ago, there would not be a major company like Compass standing up here saying, hey, we're putting this in our products now. It was not even remotely a thing. And now that's happening. So that deployment is going to grow significantly coming into this next year. And again, the Android ecosystem is crowded. I wrote a rewrite of ORM Lite in 2015 that used annotation processing, and I started writing a talk about it. And my talk was a Greek tragedy because I told everyone I built it, and I decided I wasn't going to release it because there were already like 20 different ORMs. It is like, and at this point, if you're not Groom or SQL Delight, you were done. Like, it's all over. And if you wanted to release something in Android now, it's going to be very, very difficult to get attention unless it's very niche or you work at Facebook or Google or Square and you have a bunch of marketing behind you. It's not so in multi-platform. You can get in and build something that people are going to remember for the next 10 years. So, what is Kotlin Multiplatform? And this is sort of my super condensed intro to the tech. There's Common Kotlin, which doesn't know anything about the world, as mentioned. And then there's the JVM, JS, and native flavors, the rough cut flavors. They all get bucketed into a bunch of different specific things. Multiple versions of Java, Android-specific stuff, JavaScript I know less about. You can do it. And then native is kind of all over the map. I mean, WebAssembly, all the iOS stuff, Windows. If you haven't done Windows native development in a while or ever, welcome to having to figure that out. So that's the specifics, but in general, these are the three main buckets of compilers. This is changing somewhat. They're rewriting the whole compiler ecosystem, but I don't know how that's going to go or how much it's going to change. So if you're going to build a library, let's say for native, you're going to have your common code, and then you're going to have a native layer, probably with some specific stuff, and then iOS specific. You can have multiple layers of source sets. And more so in a library you may, because you're going to need like native stuff that will be generic for iOS and Windows and Linux, and then you're going to have things that are not generic. So out of this, if you're going to build an app on iOS, let's say, you're going to make an Xcode framework. But if you're going to build a library, you have this thing called a klib. A klib is essentially a jar with a bunch of native stuff in it. It's just a zip file. On the Android side, it's a lot more straightforward because Kotlin obviously is the preferred language for Android at this point, so I probably don't need to explain this too much. You can make an app, or you can make an AAR, and then publish them. So I would say library patterns. I originally had sort of library types, but it's just not that clear. So the first library pattern, I would say, is just code. Like, you need to do a tax calculation. It needs to be super, super correct all the time, so you want to test it like crazy and write it once. That's a just code library. I'm not going to talk about them much because they're not that complicated. So, I mean, taxes may be complicated, but the implementation of the packaging is not. So then we have an SDK wrapper, which is the bulk of this talk. And it's essentially like, I have native APIs I need to converse with, and I want to have a shared common Kotlin thing that allows me to do so for one place. And that has a lot of trade-offs that you have to keep in mind. No library is really clear-cut. Like, you're going to have some native SDK wrapper stuff and some pure logic stuff in your libraries, most likely, unless you have extremely simple libraries. So just keep that in mind. And then the third type is something we're exploring with potential clients. I think it's going to be much bigger next year as we get into like the mainstream phase, which is I have an SDK I want to publish, I'm going to write it in Kotlin, and then I'm going to generate native iOS framework and native Android stuff from a single code base and native JavaScript. This is becoming easier. It was more difficult on iOS because that's a long story. Anyway, it's becoming easier. I expect to start seeing that next year, hopefully really soon for us because we have a specific client we're working on. See how that goes. So platform-specific logic, how do you implement that? So the first thing, if you've never done Kotlin native or multi-platform, is I also did an intro talk, and the problem is I took a lot of the stuff I had in here out because this talk was too long, and I put it in the intro talk for ORDEV. So there's some things missing. When you hear multi-platform, this is an aside, multi-platform is a compile time construct. At runtime, there's no such thing. So people are like, multi-platform is experimental, I don't want to use it. The Gradle configuration is experimental. The runtime is not. So at runtime, it is native or JVM or JS. It's just something to keep in mind. Anyway, expect actual. This is like a new set of keywords. It's sort of a new concept. Ish, you know, it's similar to other concepts, but it's more formal. So if I want to know in common code whether or not I'm in the main thread, the common code doesn't know about threads. So we say, I expect this value to be defined once we compile everything down. And then a separate file in the specific, Android side of the world, we're going to say this. This is the actual implementation of that question. Is this the main thread? And on the iOS side, again, in a different file set entirely, this is the iOS implementation. And when you compile down those source sets, every expect has to be defined once. If you define it twice, it will fail. And if you don't define it at all, it will fail. And the IDE will tell you when things aren't defined properly. Is that super 100% smooth right now? Like, no, but it's JetBrains, so I expect it will be at some point in this near future. Bonus points, the JavaScript implementation of this, it's just true. It's always the main thread, so that makes that really easy. I guess maybe not for workers, I don't know, whatever. I've been out of JavaScript for a decade. So you can have different types of expect in constructs. So value, which we just saw, function, which I find to be actually kind of one of the more flexible ones, class, which you can do a whole class, define it, and you have to implement it, and then object. And then just for completeness, I put up annotation, but we're not going to talk about that at all. The only time you're going to use annotation is probably in libraries where it exists on one side or the other, and you just want to have it syntactically show up and be a no-op, which is exactly what this is. This does nothing in the JVM, but you need it for iOS for various reasons. Okay, so the other thing that's along with that, type alias. And type alias, I'll give you exactly what it does, and then we'll talk about it a bit more. So in one of our libraries called Stately, this is a definition of an expect atomic int, right? And you have to implement the constructor and all these methods on there. And on the JVM side, you can just do this, and you can just type alias the shared atomic int to the actual atomic integer from concurrent in the Java utils, because they have the exact same structure, or at least the structure in Java fully implements the structure in the shared code. Right? This is obviously clean visually. It is powerful because you're not carrying a whole bunch of delegate objects around. It's pretty nice, right? Obviously, they need to match 100%, and if they don't, it's going to give you a compile error, which can be a little bit brittle at times. And the other thing that sucks about type alias is this. This is the iOS side. So now we have the bad case where we have to have a delegate, and we have to carry that around, we have to wrap all the functions, and you wind up with this whole delegate hierarchy of things, which kind of sucks. So I wrap that all under the title of platform affinity. So the middle is like some proposed Kotlin thing, and on the Android side, the thing you want to call is like that, and the iOS side is like that, so they don't really work. So you can try to type alias to one side, and then now your shared code looks like the Android code, and the iOS code has to have this whole delegate thing in the middle, or vice versa, or make it way worse if you're also doing JavaScript. So suddenly you have all these extra classes like floating around, and things are kind of great. They're kind of not great, sorry. So parallel delegates, that is the problem, right? Blah blah blah. You can So with type alias, you can kind of avoid that for one platform, but for every other platform, now you have to do this adapter thing, which kind of sucks. So the first bit of advice if you're getting into this is if your user base is going to be largely JVM side, there's sort of this like, you can't make it worse than it is now in order, but then also to share code. There's like this feeling. So if you're going to optimize your one side with regards to not introducing new classes and method counts and all this stuff, you might want to consider doing the JVM, which is what we did with Stately. So this is the Stately library, and inside all these things, there's a lot of stuff, but the total like add for the JVM is 25 methods to the index count or whatever. And index count is still important at times, and it doesn't add a lot of stuff because most of that is type aliases. Most of those functions are really extension functions, and we could probably cut that in half if we put any effort into it. So that's why we did that. I essentially got like a Slack message from Jake Ward. He's like, "What's all the Stately crap that's in SQLite now?" Well, let me rewrite Stately because now we're getting type aliases. So type aliases also can be brittle. If you haven't protected anything in the underlying Java, you can't type alias to it, even though it should be able to. So just FYI, that is 2 years old, and there's no sign of that ever being fixed. So I don't know about that. So having said all that, when you get a new thing like expect actual, suddenly you want to use that everywhere. That is the pattern every developer I've seen getting into multi-platform has, including me and Russell Wall. It's you know, you get a hammer, but it's a nail, right? So I made expect actual classes like everywhere at first, but you really should prefer interfaces. So this is directly from multi-platform settings, and settings is an interface, and originally it was not. It was like an expect actual class, as I recall. I may be wrong. Then on to the next step, I'm like, okay, we'll make everything interfaces, and we'll load all the platform specifics with an extension function like this, right? And then over time, you're like, well, that's pretty inflexible too. So in our Joy-Con app sample, which you can go check out, we essentially, on app startup, we just pass in a bunch of implementations of interfaces, and they get stored in this thing, the service registry, which sounds like a really like low-res version of dependency injection, which we're also working on a multi-platform version of Coin, but that's a longer discussion we won't get to now. So JVM and Swift both implement these interfaces to wrap platform-specific logic. So it's just interfaces and no expect actual required, because that makes testing way, way easier. Expect actual is like very inflexible if you want to just put in test implementations of various things, because it's now locked into this platform thing. So interfaces become, it's like we're relearning why people use dependency injection in interfaces all over again in a different context. So this is what it looks like. Almost everything here is an interface. Don't worry about the frozen delegate stuff. That's out of scope for today. The native memory model is different. You definitely need to understand it. I'm talking about that next week in Toronto. You should definitely get that video. There's some blog posts. Anyway, that's not important. So, minimize expect actual. The Joy-Con app now is like 9 functions and 2 classes that are expect. You could probably get rid of almost all of them if we made any effort to do so. Yeah, and what does it say? Blah, blah, blah. And if you want to hear a lot more about that again, Russell's talk was about the same topic, and he goes into much more detail about the history and evolution of this library. So go check that out. It's a very good talk. So I mentioned this Firestore SDK. We had a client recently that wanted to do multi-platform, but also wanted to use Firestore, which there is no multi-platform Firestore, just a spoiler. So we wanted to essentially wrap a large SDK surface. We were only going to do what they needed at first, but then I'm like, I know I'm giving this talk, let's make a library. So I did. The Firestore SDK is 2 or more similar things that are just like not the same. It is the classic platform affinity problem, but it is exploded over a large object graph, which is unfortunate. So I came up with this new technique. If you're really into multi-platform libraries, it's something you might want to check out. It's an empty type alias, which sounds really weird, but I'll give you a minute and I'll explain it. It's actually quite flexible. So let's say that in your Firestore you have this thing called a query snapshot. If you do query to Firestore, it gives you this object, and then you can say, okay, I actually want to get these things, and they'll give you lists of various things, and it's all asynchronous, and it's a complicated mess, right? So the SDKs are very similar between Android and iOS, except in a couple places they do like different concurrency, like something is synchronous in iOS and asynchronous in Java, which I still want to go hang out with the Firebase people, like what the hell. But essentially, if we do type alias the way we were talking about before, it's going to look like this. We're definitely going to like lean towards the JVM side, so the iOS side is going to have this, but it is a multiplied platform or delegate hierarchy thing all over the place. And it just gets worse and worse as you get deeper into the stack. And if you do with interfaces, everything has the delegate thing, because the interfaces now all have to be represented by a real class, and you have to wrap all of those delegates. So the interfaces is not necessarily a good solution in this case either, right? What we really want is this. That would be great. Then we could design the Kotlin thing the way we want and have it talk to the various platforms that we want. So empty type alias, you do everything with extension functions and properties. So it will look like this. Here is the definition of query snapshot. There is nothing to implement, so it is super straightforward to put anything in there. And then all of the actual features of a query snapshot are done with extensions, and they're all expect extensions, which is something you can do. So on the iOS side, we call it with the crazy Objective-C interop query snapshot, and then all of the things are implemented with the crazy Objective-C names like this, which is super, super long, and you don't really want to remember that. You'll notice here that we have the Kotlin-specific name that will be done in type alias as well. So even in your specific site, you can use the shared name, which is a lot cleaner. And then for document snapshot, like everything else, it's the same thing. We do type alias, yada yada. So, oh yeah, I do some arrows. Anyway, so that's the basic concept of the empty type alias. It is not all perfect. You have to watch out for return types. So, in this case, let's say in the Firestore object, there is a thing called the stable network. And you'll notice the ugly little underscore we added there. And the actual, also with the underscore. This is returning this thing called task void. But the real definition in Java is returning task of type void. This is where we get into like one side was synchronous, one side was not, kind of stuff. So we have this other object. If you have the same call signature with the same parameters but a different return type, if you're lucky, the compiler will blow up. If you're not, it'll blow up at runtime. So you have to be careful about that. And the IDE does not understand that yet. So if you're going to use this technique, be very worried about that. Yeah, if you go look at the Firebase SDK, like not all the methods have underscore, but some of them do, and that's why. So again, though, for interfaces for like service objects, you know, I went crazy with the empty type alias for all the classes in Firestore, but the root level Firestore object probably could have looked like this. And then now you can lock that much easier, and there's probably some other stuff you can do with that. I'm not perfect. I don't follow my own advice. We live and learn. I'm probably not going to update the Firestore SDK too much. It's just a sample for this talk at this point. I don't want to support it unless Google gives us money, but we'll see how that goes. So, minimize expect actual. Well, the Firestore SDK doesn't remotely minimize it, but again, it depends what you're doing. So, which these interfaces are reasonable for the reasons discussed. They're much easier to test. Type alias, we need a bunch of things and don't want parallel delegate hierarchy because that's going to get ugly. Yeah, that data classes and yada yada interfaces. They also have the parallel delegate hierarchy. It's going to be weird if you want to do extensive mocking and then also not have a bunch of interfaces because that's a problem, obviously, but we'll see how that goes. That's a talk for another day. Inline classes, this is the other option. So what an inline class is, if you're not aware, often you will have a piece of data and you want to like essentially put that inside a class and a bunch of methods on it. But now you're allocating a bunch of memory you don't really need to allocate. And Kotlin has an experimental feature where you can have one piece of data in a constructor, and you can write a bunch of classes, write a bunch of things, methods and values on it, and then the compiler just keeps that. It doesn't actually allocate name, and it just applies the methods to it, which is pretty cool. And you can imagine if our problem is a delegate hierarchy, this might alleviate the delegate hierarchy problem. However, it's experimental, and trying to use it in the Firestore, much less anything else, ran into unexpected issues, which I won't get into. And even people from JetBrains are like, slow down on the inline class thing. So I would say wait till 137 and then take another look at this because it might be good. So finally, the other way that we're really sharing logic that is meaningful is function args, which are Swift friendly. And if I rewrote this talk, I would put function args into the same bucket as interfaces because they're essentially doing the same thing in a very similar way. But the Joy-Con app needs seed data. So in the shared code, we define a static file loader that takes a prefix and a name and returns a string, a nullable string, unfortunately, or whatever. On the Android side, you go to the assets folder. You know, I won't show you that because you probably know what that looks like. On the iOS side, you just go into a bundle and you get the thing and return it. This is way easier than the way you have to do it with Kotlin interop code, at least I found. So a bunch of things are just They work essentially the same way as interfaces, just minus all the boilerplate around them, right? We all know what lambdas are. The downside, these are harder to test on iOS because when you make Kotlin native, the tests come out as an exe, and there's no place to bootstrap your Swift stuff. But when I say harder to test, I mean like if you're doing mocks for all that stuff, it's not hard to test. It's when you're trying to do more of an integration level test. So you're gonna have to like bootstrap XC test and do a bunch of Swift initialization. It's not that hard, but it's like, there's not a lot of examples of that either. So, what about OBJC platform interop? If you've started doing Kotlin native, you can point the native compiler at Objective-C, and it'll give you Kotlin out of it that you can do stuff with. However, there's a lot of kind of unpleasant config that goes into it. This is what the Firebase Firestore config looks like, and then you have to like carry around a bunch of like header files, and they kind of have to pin them to versions and definition files, and the compiler has to generate a whole bunch of stuff, which might take a while, and then you get this very unpleasant-ish Kotlin that comes out of it that you have to call and sort of mentally digest. Interop can be tricky with a library, and it can have a brittle config. Like if I was going to decide that we were going to keep doing Firestore, every time there was a new version of Firestore for iOS, we would have to like figure out if we have to upgrade our library and build a new version, and then do all that stuff. And then if you're using it, you have to update a library you don't want it. It's not pleasant. Or you can do this if you're not doing a large library. Here's an analytics call that we have in the Joy-Con applet interface, and here's what it looks like in Swift. We didn't have to write all that Firestore analytics gobbledygook. It was just like, here, pass it in implementation. So, Firestore SDK needed Objective-C because we were doing like the whole library. So obviously we needed to do interop. We're not going to do that with Swift. But if you're building a library that only needs a little bit, maybe you don't. And it's something I think it's very important to consider. So there's a Firestore SDK if you want to check it out. Again, we're not like really supporting this. It'll probably disappear in a couple months, or at least be archived. But if you're interested in library development, it is something to look at to see that particular technique. So, soft launch today, crash reporting. I soft launched this actually in Sweden, but nobody knew what I was talking about. So, like, we're soft launching it today. Like, woo, great. So we're going to do symbolicated crashes for Kotlin on iOS, starting with crash release and Bugsnag, right? So the problem is they're different platforms, and if you're used to Kotlin and the JVM, if you're like calling up into a call stack and doing a bunch of stuff and you crash here, that'll unwind with a throwable all the way to either unhandled or wherever you're catching it, and then you can report it or it'll report itself. So if you're on Android, you'll see those nice stack traces from wherever you crashed. That is not how iOS works. iOS crashes. Like, it will stop and it will get the state of the threads at that point where it stopped, and that's the thing you get. So unfortunately, if you're shipping Kotlin native in your iOS app, this is what every crash report looks like. Something, something, Swift, terminated unhandled exception, component abort. That's where it like forcibly shuts down your app. And everything about the Kotlin we're dealing with is gone. In Kotlin 1.3.6, they will look like this because of the little library we're going to pass out to people, yes? So at the unhandled exception, it gets the throwable, and then it like does the symbolication. We have to wait for 1.3.6 because they finally exposed the actual pointers from the throwable, but whatever. So it'll be cool, and if you're shipping in production, definitely take a look because you're going to want that. iOS needs interop, right? There's Crashlytics and Bugsnag libraries, right? So if you think about it, like if we wanted to like actually do interop, we would have to have two separate client libraries because you don't want to have Crashlytics and Bugsnag. And then we're going to have multiple versions and keep track of those versions. We're also going to be like interoping the entire library, which is probably not what we really want, or even going to add to compile time, right? Or we're just going to have a README with some copy paste Swift that you're going to put directly into your app. This is for, I think, Bugsnag, which is by far the more complicated one. And then for like Crashlytics, this is the entirety of the Swift you have to do. And although it is, I would say, lame as an open source developer to like tell you to copy paste code directly from a README, that's far easier than trying to do interop and maintain that, or trying to set up some sort of CocoaPods thing for like that. That's bananas. So we're not doing it. mean we will be soft launching with 136. If you want to see this, I am not hard to track down. I'm on the Kotlin Slack group. You can write to me anytime you want. I will absolutely give you access to this. I'm just not publicly releasing it because you can't use it in 135. You can use it in 136 EAP, but there's some extra work involved, right? Okay. So publishing and CI. I'm going to briefly talk about this because, frankly, you're not going to retain the configuration in your brain of how to do publish to Maven Central if I talk about it in a talk. But you have two options to publish your library: Maven Central and Bintray. Jetpack does not work, and every few weeks somebody decides they're going to figure out why, and then they don't. Until Jetpack says Jetpack supports multi-platform, just don't worry about it. It's just not going to work. You can do a publish to Maven local, which is kind of what I do when I'm evaluating stuff. But if you want to publish to public, it's either Bintray or Maven Central. So the process of publishing to Maven Central, I do through Sonatype. You have to go to this link, and it's going to take a few days because you have to ask them for an account and a namespace, and they vet who you are, which is kind of interesting. And that's kind of like the Square world does it that way, so it's super like, and we do that way now too. We used to do Bintray when we moved over to Maven Central, and the Firestore also has an example of it. Bintray, there's a blog post, go read it. Bintray is easier to get started because you don't need to wait for days and all that kind of stuff. But if you want to read some fun rants, go read Jay Wharton's opinion about Bintray. I'll leave it there. So CI, Travis, again, a lot of my world is coming from like working with the Square folks, right? But we haven't moved to Travis, and Travis takes a lot of config, especially for the weird stuff. If you want to do point and click, App Center for Microsoft actually works really well, unless you're doing Windows and other stuff. I think most of the world, at least right now, is moving to Azure pipelines because you can also do Windows, and it's a much more, there's no limit on open source building, whereas App Center actually has a limit on how much time a month you can do building, which sucks. There is this, which also, please wait till next week, because Ben from my team was supposed to finish a short blog post on getting started, and we have a repo, and he was going to explain how to do CI and all that stuff, and he didn't quite finish it this week. So let's say Monday, Tuesday. I'm going to pressure him when I'm back in the office. Like, come on. So let's see. Let's take a quick mental break. That's it for the tech, kind of. Now we're just going to talk bigger stuff.
With Stately? You talked about Stately, but like...
It's a library. It's like, it mostly provides a way to, in common code, call the methods and do the things you need to do for native with concurrency, but in shared code, so you don't need to like do all this weird stuff. Which, I have a two-part blog post about how to do native concurrency that needs a third part that actually explains how to do it with multi-platform, which I haven't written yet, and I apologize, but that's what Stately is. All right, so general thoughts, right? Oh, what's going on here? The annotations, I might change that. It was cool when I was doing it, and then I've been standing up and I'm like, oh, I gotta click the button multiple times. I don't know. So big blockers in the Kotlin Multiplatform library world. There are no compiler plugins. You cannot do annotation processing. It is not happening. That is changing fairly soon. There's this thing called Arrow Meta, which is also pushing the boundaries in that. If you want to understand that. But I don't know how long it's going to be before you can write your own compiler plugins ad hoc. And even if you can, you're going to be dealing with like LOVM, IR, and native, which is non-trivial. So we'll see how that transforms over the next year. I'm not sure how that's going to go. Multi-threaded coroutines. If you know what coroutines are, a native, you can't use multiple threads for your coroutines, which has been like a huge mental block for people adopting, and it's been sort of a huge block on multi-threaded or concurrent libraries, because nobody wants to build a library that's going to be outdated as soon as multi-threaded coroutines happens. And then a few days ago, there's a branch that implements multi-threaded coroutines, so we're expecting at least a preview version of that in 136, which should land anytime in the next few weeks. Here's Roman, who's going to put that in there. I guess we're just talking about 136. That's super exciting for me because we've been waiting for that forever. And I currently have it building on my laptop, but I can't get my app to see the dependency, which is super frustrating. So we'll see how that goes. What does that mean? Oh, I just explained that. Kind of. It means that a lot of people are waiting to do concurrent libraries are going to be doing them. A lot of the architecture around concurrent libraries is going to be updated. But I also think the big psychological barrier of like, oh, there's no coroutines, that means you can't do concurrency, that means it's not ready yet. It's like, none of those things are really true exactly, but now it's super not true because that is going to be there and it removes that block. There's also this ongoing like debate about the memory model, which everyone thought like we need to get rid of the memory model, then we can have coroutines. But now it's like, no, you can have coroutines with the weird memory model. They're not incompatible, so that's going to change. I have to talk about concurrency to Kotlin now. It's going to be interesting. So here's a Joy-Con app. I think it was one of the first apps in the App Store that was multi-platform, and it's a little overdue for a refresh. It's Kotlin 1.3.4.1, and I would say that we don't do tests. We have things that are in the test folder that run, but they don't really test any functionality, so that's kind of embarrassing. This is going to get a major overhaul once I get back from Kotlin with multi-threaded coroutines and whatever, so we want it to be like a real example of that. Again, I have to go explain the thing at Kotlin. So the other thing that's interesting is institutional libraries, right? So by that I mean stuff that you would expect to be provided by the platform authors, and that is datetime and locale and files and I/O. Like, in your mind, that that's really going to be provided by, the people building a platform, right? And so we have this interesting situation of date libraries. There is this, which was written by some guy who didn't have a lot of tests, and I didn't understand why he was doing it. There's no time zone support that I'm aware of. We have Eric in this room, who wrote a library that just released like a couple of weeks. Okay. Is it previewed?
There's snapshot builds.
It's not a private repo, that means it's released.
Fair enough.
Okay. Welcome to the bleeding edge. Then there's this one I completely forgot about. Somebody was trying to expect actual between Android and iOS at this time libraries. I haven't tried it. Then I took the entirety of Java time and tried to port it to Kotlin, which does work. And then I talked to JetBrains and stopped because they're like, yeah, we're working on our own datetime library. We're definitely not doing it that way. So this is sort of in mothballs. So there's a lot of time for libraries, and just pointing that out. So what to work on? This is the moral of that story. You should be careful. Nobody does open source because they're bored and they just feel like helping the world. Everyone does it kind of for a reason. Usually to advertise themselves or their career, or you're trying to get attention for your consulting business. Whatever the reason is that you're doing it, right? You don't want to work on something that no one's going to care about. So my first bit of advice is like skip datetime libraries. That's coming. Don't go there. But having said that, mocking is a big missing piece in Kotlin data. There is no reflection and currently no plugins, so there's no real mocking library. If you've used mock, that the author of mock wants help, then the Kotlin native team will give you a special compiler plugin entry point for mock specifically if you want to do that. However, it's going to be exceptionally difficult if you're going to understand LLVM at a deep level if you're going to make that happen. There's a lot to implement. What does the Swift community do? Well, they just do code gen. And they actually I found a couple of like compiler plugins that you can have an interface or a protocol, and then have a mock class, and then the IDE will inject all of the implementation you need, or a command line tool. So I've actually built essentially the same thing with IntelliJ's IDE. So you can have a mock class that's pointing at an interface, and we can inject a whole bunch of mock tracking stuff. What I don't have is a thorough implementation of the thing that gets injected. I have a basic one, but I'm not really a mocking expert. So I'm trying to figure out what's the minimum feature set that you would really need for that to be functional. If you are super excited about this world and want to get involved in open source, reach out to me because I'm definitely looking to work with some folks on what that looks like. So we have some feasible mocking implementation. File I/O that is an institutional library. However, JetBrains has been sitting on their library for like over a year and haven't done anything with it. And I suspect if you're going to make a native mobile-only implementation, that could be like the implementation because JetBrains is going to try to do something that works on all platforms. It's not necessarily going to work for mobile. So it's something to think about. Server contracts are going to be a big, big deal. There's a couple Swagger implementations, but I don't know if either of them is really like enterprise grade, whatever the heck that means. GraphQL, there is some implementation, but I don't know how good that one is. The Apollo team, and especially the iOS Apollo engineer, Alan Shapiro, is also in the Kotlin native community, and if you want to work on that, I'm sure she would be very, very helpful, and that would be great. gRPC, Square's kind of working on Wire 3, which is sort of gRPC adjacent. I expect they're going to have a pretty good implementation of that, but it's something to keep an eye on. This is the kind of stuff we're really going to need for like hardcore development like going forward for the next year. So it's something to look at. Architecture, it's a big word. We've been to an Android conference, a lot of people talk about architecture. And there's a lot of stuff changing, especially with how UI is done. So there's a lot of places where there's space to build libraries for this and try stuff out. And I expect that there's going to be a lot of smaller libraries that release over the next year that are trying to fill in little gaps. Like the reactive border, like an Android, you know, people kind of, I've been seeing people use RX to get the UI that is live native for the lifecycle. We have some sort of analog in iOS that makes sense, you know, what about an adapter for RX Swift? There's a whole host of those things. What happens with Swift UI? What happens with Compose? Like, what's MVI look like in this model? That kind of thing. Logging, everyone's kind of waiting on Timber, you know what Timber is. But there are like 5 other logging libraries out there, which is kind of bananas. So UI, I thought there was no UI. I think that there are going to be silos of UI, like if you want to build a form builder, something that like is a sort of specialized thing, that's absolutely going to, there's going to be some successful versions of that. Down the road, you know, there could be something that's UI focused. I don't know, see how that goes. Probably not yet, it's a little early. The most important thing, I think, is join the Slack. Let's like chat, let's work together. Like if you just kind of build stuff on your own, you know, you might pick something that's straightforward to do and you don't know that there are tons of other people working on it, such as a library for logging. I'd rather have 4 logging libraries and 1 like passable mock library than like 5 logging libraries. So like by bike shedding, I mean like they'll pick a library that's really straightforward to build and like get another logging library. There's a lot of them. I mean, do what you want, but you know, no, we have to. Let's like work together to focus on the stuff that doesn't exist. I real briefly like what we worked on. You know, again, there's a Kotlin Xcode plugin that lets you debug Kotlin in Xcode, and the associated Gradle plugin to get your Kotlin into Xcode. Stately, which is a multi-platform state facilitation library. SQLite, which is the SQLite driver underneath SQLite on native. And some other smaller stuff, the crash reporting and other things that will be coming out. What we are building is, I mentioned it earlier, it's a KMP evaluation kit. So we talked to multiple orgs where they are going to evaluate KMP and they say to a dev, like, here, take a week, go figure it out. And it's usually an Android dev, and they decide that they're going to try to put Kotlin Multiplatform in their production iOS app, even though they don't know how to build iOS apps. So come Thursday afternoon, they're still not compiling. And then the report is like, well, it's not ready. So what we're going to do is have multiple repos of different types of things and intro explanations and documentation to get you started, plus the concurrency model. The goal being by Monday afternoon you have something that compiles and is reasonably useful and you can spend the rest of the week evaluating. That is on target for like mid-December. The marketing geniuses have called it the camp kit. We have a space theme, so I don't know how they're going to merge those. We'll see how that goes. You have to sign up with your email address, and if you just wait until it gets fully released, because you don't want to give your email address. I got bad news. We're a consulting company, and I have to feed the marketers data, otherwise they don't eat. So even if you're not a lead, they're going to want your contact info. So you'll always have to give us your email address for this. But I promise it'll be useful if you're going to evaluate KMP. That is it for me. That is my talk about libraries. You can find me on Slack and ask me anything else you want. There's my Twitter. There's a company thing. We are absolutely hiring. We're hiring sort of mid-level-ish engineers who are really interested in Kotlin Multiplatform. We're sort of slowly looking for a senior-level counterpart to myself, but that's probably going to be early next year. But keep that in mind. We work on a bunch of open source stuff, do a bunch of community stuff. It's a lot of fun, unless we have a shitty client, but they're usually not. So it's great.
Cool.
That's it.
Thanks, Kevin. I'm going to ask the first question.
Sure.
What Slack do you want us to work on?
There's a Kotlin community Slack. Just type in Kotlin community Slack into Google, and you'll eventually wind up there. I had the link, but it was in the intro talk. I was like, this is where I'm missing slides for this one.
It's cool. It's cool. I just figured I could ask a dumb question. I thought there were some other questions.
Sure.
This is a question about any possible current or future adoption of Kotlin multi-platform development. It still is in its earlier stages, but how well would Swift developers or other types of developers be willing to start with Kotlin or deal with these tool sets and change the way they work? That takes a little bit of convincing, I think. Is that a major hurdle, or how should we
So
go about that?
my answer to that is like, I think when you're in a community, you tend to view other communities as monolithic in their thinking. So obviously every Android developer immediately used Kotlin and they threw Java in the trash, right? No. Like there's people that are super focused on early stuff and they're more open to different things. There's people that don't want to hear about it, you know. So the way that we approach the iOS community partially is like, that's why the Xcode plugin exists. Because if the story is like, hey, here's this other language, and you have to install all these other tools, and you have to learn all this stuff to use it, like, that's a much harder sell. If it's just, hey, open up Xcode and you can at least debug it, that helps. Politically, it's like, finding the people that are curious, find the people that want to have the superpower of being able to like push code into the Android code base, and that recognize this is going to be helpful for their careers. Like the curious people, you start with them. And you start thinking of yourselves as mobile developers and not iOS and Android. Are there Swift engineers who just don't want to hear about it? Yep. But you know, you have to like try to work around them. And then essentially, like, if it's a large enough board, those folks don't ever really have to deal with it. You know, there's plenty of other stuff to work on. It's not like you're suddenly, that's the other thing too, it's like now you're suddenly doing UI kit stuff with Kotlin. I mean, it's not. You're doing like little bits, you're doing analytics, you're doing just coordinated replacement or whatever. It's usually where it starts. But are there Swift people who hate it? Like, of course. Absolutely.
Just removing the friction, basically.
Yeah, I mean, you try. Well, there's also like an amount of like time. You know, like if you just present it and there's no rational reason to dislike it other than the fact that you're on Team Swift. Over time, cognitive dissonance works on your brain. Like you have to admit that you just hate it because you want Swift, and then that a little bit opens your mind to new ideas. Hopefully, some people, damn. But yeah, what do you do? Yes.
I've been really enjoying Google's Code Labs for picking up new things. Are there any chance, like, are you aware of any Code Labs for Kotlin Multiplatform, which could maybe help with a quick introduction to building a multi-platform?
I don't know if there's like Google Code Labs. However, Ben from my team, who was supposed to do the other thing that he's late on, wrote a series of articles for 5 minutes where you essentially, once you install the tools, you can clone the repo and have shared code compiling like within 5 minutes, and he explains the stuff. And we're committing to updating it at every Kotlin release, because the other problem is out in the wild, all the blog posts are old. So I don't know about Google. We're going to have a longer meeting with the JetBrains people at KotlinConf about their marketing, which is all sort of related to Code Labs, and because it's technical marketing. I mean, it's open source and it's free, but it's still marketing. So that part is definitely lacking. We've had conversations about it. Soon, it's going to be. But we're like, Touch Lab is trying to like produce that stuff because it's not there from Google. So I'll share it to like this slides, but then also you should look at the intro slides. So I have other links. So I didn't have them all in this talk. So, yeah.
Hi, this is new to me from the standpoint of KMP and Flutter. Why not Flutter? How do the two at a top level, completely new person come into it? How do they differ? Why use one over the other?
There's definitely much more in the intro talk, but let me do the summary, which is Flutter's interop story sucks. So like if you want to put Flutter into an existing production app, Flutter wants to treat Flutter as its own thing, so now you have to write, you have to decide, are you going to put all your architecture and storage in the native apps and you have to translate over the Flutter barrier? Are you going to store it in Flutter and then you have to translate to the native apps? Are you going to rewrite your whole app? What happens if Google gets tired of supporting iOS? Why are they supporting iOS? There's like this whole element of risk besides hiring or training an entirely new team. And instead of like 2 code bases, now you have 3. Like, you know, there's an element of risk, and there's lessons learned from where React Native didn't do well that Flutter is not addressing. I feel like you're doing a really good job selling to individual developers, but an org with like hundreds of engineers is not super excited about the idea of changing how they build their existing apps. So there is traction, but it is problematic to pitch that. Versus Kotlin, I'm saying like, hey, none of the iOS developers are core data. Let's just swap that out with SQLite, and they're not going to know anything any different. difference because it's just an Xcode module. So the interrupt story is much better. I don't particularly say Flutter versus this thing so much because they're just super different. And I think they're going to coexist and solve that way different problems. But yeah, I'm not a big Flutter believer. I don't dislike it, but you know.
Is there a video of your intro talk there? If I want to.
That's a good question, and I'll have to check with BoardDev. If not, we'll just make one and publish it the next week or two from the office.
Okay, so we're a bit over time and I'm gonna call it, but Kevin will be here if you have a question that we didn't get to.